We are exploring the absolute limits of Philippine law by tracing the invisible lines of authority that govern everything from the highest political offices all the way down to a single everyday document. Our anchor for this journey is a fascinating 2020 case, Gaspi v. Pacis-Trinidad. It's a story that perfectly illustrates exactly how the bounds of justice are drawn, tested, and ultimately enforced. Okay, let's dive into this. Meet Luz Gaspi Lipson. She was an American citizen living temporarily in Iriga City in the Philippines. She lived her life, made her plans, and left behind a last will and testament right there in Iriga. But when the time came to actually honor her final wishes, it sparked this massive jurisdictional puzzle. The big question was, can a local Philippine court actually process and execute the will of a foreign national? I mean, it sounds like a simple administrative question, right? But it actually strikes at the very heart of how nations respect each other's laws while still enforcing their own. So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. An American's last will. 2. The power of judicial review. 3. Due process and accountability. 4. Foreigners and property laws. 5. Resolving the Gaspi case. And 6. The reach of justice. To understand the ultimate fate of Luz's will, we have to explore the absolute limits of Philippine law, from presidents all the way down to personal property. All right, let's start with part 1, An American's Last Will. So, let's look at the timeline. Back in 2011, Luz Lipson executes her will, and she designates a man named Roel Gaspi as her executor. Fast forward to October 2015, and sadly, at 70 years old, Luz passes away. The very next year, in 2016, Gaspi does what any executor would naturally do, right? He files a petition for the probate of her will so her wishes can be carried out. But then, a massive plot twist. The regional trial court completely dismissed the petition motu proprio, which basically means they did it on their own accord, saying they lacked jurisdiction entirely just because Luz was an American citizen. Just like that, her final wishes were thrown into total legal limbo. That brings us to Section 2, the power of judicial review. To understand how to solve Luz's case, we have to zoom out to the macro level and see how the Supreme Court operates. There's this landmark quote from the Angara case that notes, "When the judiciary mediates to allocate constitutional boundaries, it does not assert any superiority, but only asserts the solemn and sacred obligation assigned to it." This perfectly shows the immense, yet strictly defined role of the court. They aren't acting like a superior ruler just making up rules on the fly. They act as constitutional referees, performing a solemn duty to figure out exactly where the boundaries of authority lie. So the crucial point is how we define judicial power. It's the duty to settle actual controversies involving legally demandable rights and to allocate constitutional boundaries. The courts literally do not deal in hypotheticals or offer abstract advice. They need a real, actual controversy, like Roel Gaspi trying to validate Luz's will and being told no. That's when the courts step in to draw lines in the sand, definitively deciding who has the power to do what under the Constitution. Moving right along to Section 3, Due Process and Accountability. Let's look at how this immense power applies to essential rights. In the famous Tanyada v. Tuvera case, the Supreme Court drew a hard, absolute line. Laws must be published in the official gazette or effectively promulgated to have any binding force whatsoever. This is a matter of fundamental due process. I mean, think about it. It is an elementary rule of fair play that you have a right to be informed of a law before you can be punished for violating it. If a rule is kept completely secret, the government literally has no authority to enforce it against you. It's the ultimate check on arbitrary power. And you know, the court applies this exact same objective, clinical approach even to incredibly high-stakes political issues. Take the anti-plunder law, which was challenged as being unconstitutionally vague in the Estrada case. The Supreme Court totally bypassed the politics and just looked at the strict legal test. They broke down the elements clearly. Is there a public officer acting with others? Are they amassing ill-gotten wealth? Does the total amount reach at least 50 million pesos? By strictly defining these elements, the court ensures accountability exists, but only through a rigorous standard that respects the due process of the accused. And this brilliantly illustrates our next concept, quo warranto. As seen in the highly publicized Republic versus Sereno case, this is a legal proceeding to determine a person's right or title to a public office, and to oust the holder if they're found to be ineligible. The court ruled that even impeachable officers are subject to this test. It's really important to note that it's not about removing an officer for bad behavior. That's what impeachment is for. Quo warranto is the court neutrally asking, did you legally have the right to hold the seat in the first place? It's all about maintaining those strict boundaries of constitutional qualifications. Let's narrow our focus back down in Section 4, Foreigners and Property Laws. Let's move to and see how this builds towards our main mystery. Consider the Sadwani case, where the Supreme Court was crystal clear. Aliens are absolutely prohibited from acquiring private lands in the Philippines, and if they can't own it, they can't transmit it through succession to their heirs either. The ban is super strict to protect the national patrimony. Contrast that with the Gaspi case. Luz is a foreigner who left a will involving property in the Philippines. So if foreigners face such incredibly strict property bans, does that mean her entire will is just void? Can a local court even legally process it? It is finally resolution time. Section 5, Resolving the Gaspi case. The Supreme Court stepped in and reversed the trial court using these exact super clever steps. Step 1. They clarified that checking the extrinsic validity of a will, meaning were there enough witnesses, was it signed properly, is not the same thing as applying the nationality principle to who gets what. A local court is perfectly capable of checking if a piece of paper is legally valid. Step 2. When it comes to the actual distribution of the estate, an alien's national law can absolutely be pleaded and proved right here in a local Philippine probate court. Step 3. If the foreign law isn't properly pleaded and proved, well, Philippine law just governs by default. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark difference between the two rulings. The regional trial court basically just threw their hands up. They said she's American, so her will must be probated in the U.S. first, and only then can we recognize that foreign judgment. But the Supreme Court stepped in and ruled that was entirely inefficient and incorrect. The SC stated, no, you can absolutely probate the will locally, right here in the Philippines, and simply apply her national law during the proceedings. They brilliantly saved Luz's will just by properly defining the boundaries of local jurisdiction. And finally, Section 6, the reach of justice. We've seen today exactly how the Supreme Court draws lines, whether it's demanding laws be published so you aren't unfairly punished, holding high officials accountable through strict legal tests, or ensuring a foreign national's final wishes are respected in a local court. It all comes down to structured, boundary-driven justice. So I want to leave you with this thought. How does the invisible reach of the rule of law shape the boundaries of your own everyday life? From the property you own to the rules you follow, the law is literally always there, structuring our world. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.